Hello, everyone, and welcome to my presentation, Mobile DevSecOps, 5 tips from building mobile apps used by Zillions. I'm Brian Reed, the Chief Mobility Officer of NowSecure, and we're a partner of Bitrise in the mobile development world, bringing security to the table. A little bit about NowSecure. We've been in the industry for more than 12 years. We were here at the birth of the modern iPhone and Android platforms. We work with the largest high-tech financial, retail, government organizations in the world, as you've seen here. I myself have 15 years in mobile, going back to BlackBerry, and I'm going to tell you the story of building mobile apps at scale, securely and safely. So we all know the world is going mobile. All of you are here as mobile developers, mobile DevOps experts. You might be some security folks. And so we all know that mobile is gobbling the world or really dominates the world. But mobile security is lagging as well. Some 85% of mobile apps in the App Store violate the OWASP industry standard. Some 70% leak data that could violate GDPR. So throughout today's session, I'll be in the Q&A and the chat. You can ask me questions in the Q&A and chat with me in the chat as well as we go along here. So what we got here on the left is all about innovation. It's all about mobile innovation, how to create these great apps with great experiences for our customers. But how do we do it in a way that protects that sensitive data to make sure they get that great experience, but their data is protected throughout? So if you think about your own organization, what does your development, security, and operations look like? Are you in the dark ages with a little bit of manual testing? Are you in the steamroller where dev just basically runs over the security team and there's not a lot of security testing or security training going on? Or are you in the world of automation rules? And we're going to help you get to that world of automation rules. So the fundamentals really start with this notion of a delicate balancing act, right? So when development goes for speed, sometimes that can overrun quality and security. But if we flip it, when security dominates and quality needs to be perfect, oftentimes development feels like their speed is slowing them down. So we want to bring together these two labels. We want to balance the seesaw here. And that's through a proper mobile DevSecOps strategy. And when we look at it, if we can bring together the world so development and security teams have a what's best for the business, what's best for the user mindset, then they're more likely to be in sync throughout the process. And in fact, we can bring those teams together to be really effective. On the development side, let's bring together a secure by design strategy, right? Dev wants speed with low friction. They want to only break the build when they need to. They want low false positives and so on and so forth. And security needs to protect the business. They need to ensure that those security bugs are found and fixed, but they also want to speed up the process. So maybe we can bring together a secure by design and a trust but verify approach in order to bring the two teams together to achieve those success. The other core element here is this notion of triangulating on the big three. Foundationally, you have the automated testing that has to be integrated in the mobile development lifecycle. You need to bring in pen testing periodically for those high-risk applications to give you the deepest and widest of mobile app coverage. And then you need training embedded throughout, right? Making sure everybody understands their role and everybody has the best practices when security comes to mind. So what I'd like to do, just like the title here, is kind of look at some organizations who've already done this. So we're going to do 3 little case studies of organizations that literally support millions and millions, maybe as much as 1 billion mobile users at scale. So our first one, you might use this app yourself, it's Uber, right? So Uber has one code base, but 100 global builds. They do custom builds for almost every app store in every country because there's unique things in each country. There's over 500 million Android installs alone. Very large development organization, thousands of developers. They've got a lot of local customization and regional innovations. So they have to be able to do everything very fast. So they practice incrementalism, they automate everything. And there's a really great story here you can watch in a video here of Matt Rainey about what they had known, wishing what he had known before they scaled. So this is one of the ultimate and scale type organizations. Now let's look at massive local customization. So when you look at McDonald's as an organization, McDonald's is a combination of company stores and franchise stores. And depending on what country you're in, or even what city or state you're in, or what area you're in, geography, as they've been going through their growth, they have a lot of local food specialties, depending on the world, the country you're in and the food preferences there. So over the past decade, they've gone through a $6 billion digital transformation and really moved to a mobile-first, digital-oriented world. And you may have seen the giant tablets in their retail outlets, as well as their mobile apps on the device as well. And so they've had to figure out how to have a massive, a highly secure code base with thousands of services customizable to each local store. The franchisees might be choosing the menu, not them. Oh, and by the way, they want to do things like partner with Uber for food delivery and everything else. So their food delivery has grown dramatically, their revenues have grown dramatically, and they transitioned into this new digital world. The third one I'd like to talk about is what we call a one big fat pipe. And so this is Allstate. They're an insurance organization in the United States. They're actually an app innovation company as well. And while they do insurance, they actually help build application not just for themselves and their customers, their partners, but for the industry overall. They've actually been awarded multiple awards for award-winning mobile experiences because of their innovations. So what they've done is they've created a large pipeline infrastructure. And so they build out that infrastructure that allows any organization or any team to rapidly spin up a new application development process. They fill out a form, they dynamically get granted cloud, on-prem storage, and any of the cloud infrastructures, Amazon, Azure, what have you. It then spools up other tools and dependencies throughout it, depending on how they specify what they need. Do they need storage? Do they need access to legacy systems? Do they need new transactional functionality, and so on and so forth? What's really cool about this infrastructure is all of their functional and security testing is built in, all of their governance is built in. And so they've been able to innovate in insurance and for their partners throughout North America as a result of this focused pipeline strategy in their business. So here's 3 different organizations we've seen. Let's take a look at what they all have in common. What they all have in common is really this notion of they've applied these 5 steps that I'm going to go through here to building their mobile DevSecOps pipeline. I'm going to remind you, I can take questions in the Q&A as we go. I'm alive in the chat here as well as we go through the session. Feel free to ask me and follow along. So let's take a look at the typical software pipeline. Right, so you probably have one of these in your organization. You have a whole variety of tools based on Bitrise and a ticketing system and other code repos and so forth. And your process probably looks something like this, and you'll have your own picture for this. So standardize, skill the team, you have requirements that you write, you have to code the apps, you commit, build, and test, and that's kind of rinse and repeat in the middle. Eventually you get to stage and deploy, and then finally you monitor in production. So as we take a look at this typical software pipeline, we think about that conversation we had earlier about bringing dev and sec together. Let's take a look at where we get started. And before you ever write a line of code, before you write any requirements, we recommend you start with standards. Now, you probably already have pipelines in place, but take a pause and come back and let's look at standards. Now, in this presentation, I'm going to talk about leveraging the OWASP Mobile Application Security Project for both your development and your security teams. Now, you might say, if I'm focused on development, why should I start with security? Well, if you take a look at what OWASP has been doing, they've really been working to bring dev and security teams together. And the strategy for building a secure application is not one of testing the application. The strategy is about architecting and designing a secure infrastructure, a secure application up front, and then going through the process of writing the code and testing the code. So OWASP has some great resources, the MASVS, the Mobile Application Security Verification Standard. That's the guidelines for you on best practices for dev, sec, QA, and architects to design and code mobile applications and test those applications as they're being built. The MSTG is the testing guide specifically. It's the cookbook for the mobile application security testing team. Now, when we look inside of this, if you think about when you were at school, you probably read chapters of a book in order to learn something. Well, it's organized into 8 chapters. So architecture and design, data storage, crypto, authentication, network communication, environmental interaction, code quality, and finally resiliency against reverse engineering. Now, again, whether you're architect, a developer, QA person, or security person, all of these are valuable to you. Now, the second part of choosing standards is using industry standard security tools in your pipeline. So make sure you have static testing, analyzing the binary post-compilation to discover those vulnerabilities. Now, you may be doing static testing today, but you should realize that in mass analysis of millions of apps in the App Store, we've discovered that static source code testing only finds about 20% of all the actual vulnerabilities that can make it into production. Interestingly enough, dynamic testing, the hardest kind of testing to do, dynamic testing attacks the binary, the device, the network, and the APIs at runtime from the outside in. This can be done through manual pen testing. This can be done through automated testing software. And the whole idea of outside in is it's watching the app run and attacking it, right? It's trying to use bad certificates, or it's trying to intercept data over the network, or it's trying to tear apart files and storage on the device. That actually finds about 50% of all the known vulnerabilities. There's interactive testing, and that's a yin and yang with dynamic. So interactive brings together this notion of code embedded in the actual application that collects telemetry from the inside out. And so DAST and IAST work together, one outside in, one inside out, and that gives you that dynamic coverage so that while the application is running, you're getting telemetry from inside, attacks from the outside, and bringing that all together. Now, we all know a mobile app talks to a back end, so we also need API sec testing, and that basically means you're evaluating the back end to identify shadow or unapproved APIs and secure APIs, and so on and so forth. So when you bring it all together, there isn't a single testing tool or approach that solves the problem. You got to bring all of these together to kind of get that full coverage of security. So we've learned about OWASP. We've learned about our testing tools. Let's step into number 2. Number two is where we start bringing the security and development teams together by establishing policies and SLAs. Now I'm going to leverage our pipeline diagram as I kind of talk through the storyline. So we want to bring all those stakeholders together, right? We want to agree on that everyone is responsible for quality and security. Everyone has a role in it. And we want to establish SLAs for how the architecture is designed, the code is written, systems are testing, remediation is done. And as we learned in step one, we will want to leverage industry standards like the OWASP MASVS. And so let's step into this. So bring together all of these stakeholders, right? So we can use OWASP, we can align to a corporate policy and industry regulation like GDPR. We want to get the teams together for predictability, and we want to implement policy as code in those pipeline tools. So let's take a look at a quick example of a standard policy SLA. All will agree to maybe using a tiered risk model. Not all apps have the same risk, so let's figure out what the sensitive data is and tune to the tiered risk model. The higher the risk, the more complicated the work. Product can help the security team writing security requirements. Devs will use certain kinds of coding practices and accept training. Devs will only use approved libraries or scan any new libraries they bring in. Devs will fix the security bugs in a certain amount of time when provided by security. Security will test just the items agreed to, and they'll test them at a certain rate. Security will provide dev with tickets ranked or stack ranked so they know how to prioritize them. QA will help automate the security scans during the functional tests. DevOps will agree to bring in security tools and integrate them into the system. And DevOps will monitor the production environments for security metrics as well. So we bring together all the teams and we establish these service level agreements about how the team should work together. Now let's take a look at the next one. So step 3 here, or best practice 3, is enabling continuous security training. So security for quality in the pipeline, our step 3 here is really about continuous learning, right? How to bring AppSec training into the groups. So we should establish a security culture of continuous learning. We can bring together a combination of proactive and reactive training that I'll show you here. Now, if you really want to gain advancements, consider gamification, right? Gamification, you can do hackathons, you can have some fun at work, you can do capture the flags, what have you. A lot of the 3 organizations I talked to you earlier all leverage these kind of strategies. And really, one of the top best practices approach is bringing a security champions program into your organization. Now, there really are, we've learned and our customers have learned that there's 2 complementary training strategies here. There's the proactive security training side of the house, and this is where you want to teach a handful of key security fundamentals tied to the most common developer failures. We're going to take a look at that in a minute. Then there's the reactive security training. So when you find security issues and those security issues flow into bug tickets, make sure embedded development remediation is included there with some micro training so that the developer can learn from that issue, not only fix the issue, but not repeat that issue in the future. And that's how you get to continuous improvement as well. Now, diving in, we've been benchmarking and analyzing millions and millions of mobile apps in the app stores over the past almost 10 years. And so when we analyze what are the most frequent security issues in pre and prod, what we've discovered really is there's a top 5 to know. So while it might seem there's a lot of security things I might need to know, there's actually 5 you need to understand, 5 areas to focus on. The first is insecure storage and crypto. 50% of all apps we test have insecure data storage and crypto. Now, there's the MASVS V2 and V3 with links here that you can use. That's where you can go to learn as a developer and learn as a tester how to code and test for those. I've also included the Android documentation and the iOS documentation here as well. There's insecure network communication is the next one, 48%, still almost half. MASVS V5 will teach you how to write code and test for it. I've got my links for Android and iOS here too. Fast follower behind that is insecure coding practices. And there's a whole variety of those, from leaving debug on to improperly managing memory and so on and so forth. So MASVS V7 will walk you through that. Again, got links to Android and iOS documents. 1/3 of apps have exposure to reverse engineering. Now on iOS, obviously they have DRM that slows the bad guy down, but on Android, there isn't any built-in DRM. MASVS V8 will help you with that. There is Android documentation to help you deal with anti-tampering. And then finally, big gap. It's nice to know that authentication is pretty good, but insecure authentication is still there. Take a look at MASVS V4 to learn more about that. Links also to the Android and iOS documents here. So these benchmarks, the reason we share this is so you can understand where to focus your teams for secure development best practices and for secure testing as well. You make some really big gains by just focusing on the top 5. And I've got a link to a class you can take to learn this at the end. Want to remind folks, you can ask questions using the Q&A, and I'm live in the chat as well. So as we get to number 4, automated testing and remediation, we've been through standards, right, using OWASP and the types of testing. We've been through policy and SLA alignment to bring dev and sec together. We've been through training. Now we need to get to the meat of it, which is automated testing and remediation in the pipeline. So as we think about driving security into the pipeline, what we want to do is integrate automated binary security in the pipeline. Remember, we said binary analysis is more accurate. If you're using static source code scanning, you might be getting 20% of code coverage. So automated binary will get you there. Now make sure it's got SAST, DAST, IAST, and API sec, as we said earlier. You can leverage the OWASP security testing guides in order to make it all work. And then you can dial in the scanning frequency and depth based on your policy and risk. So if it's a high risk application, you want to scan every build every day and have deep and wide scanning. If it's a low risk application, you're building it only periodically, test it periodically as necessary. Make sure those results are high accuracy, of course, because developers hate inaccurate results. So here's an example. Let's take a look at build, test, ticket, and remediate. So we start by building. So here's Bitrise automatically building our mobile application. At the end of the build, Bitrise automatically fires off a request for automated security analysis. That analysis runs in, say, 15 or 20 minutes. Then the analysis is done, and tickets are automatically generated and fed into a ticketing system. Here, for example, is Jira or Confluence. So in this process or in this strategy now, you get automated build, automated testing, automated ticket generation, no human interaction in any of this, no human needs to filter things. Your policy is determining what's getting tested. Your policy is determining what's getting routed to whom and filtering the results in order to choose those kinds of things that you've agreed in your policy that your teams are going to test and commit for. Now, as we move into the next step, we want to automatically generate issue tickets into those ticketing boards as well. Those ticketing boards, whatever ones you're using, should be prioritized, right? So include the dev remediation that's necessary to fix it. And what do we mean by embedded development remediation? Well, those tickets should include the evidence of the issue and where it was found, an explanation of what the issue is, its business impact in the issues it's creating, repair guides and remediation instructions, sample codes, and even links to docs so that they can fix it. Now, we want this because we want to help them learn how to fix it and fix it quickly so you get a fast remediation, but you also want to train them so they don't make the mistake again in the future. So here's another example here. On the left, you can see a security report, API encoding sensitive information in secure crypto. We've got all that description information. We've got recommended fixed, and we have the code examples so they can copy those code examples and use them. On the right-hand side, we're seeing it show up in a Jira ticket, right? So in here, you have your remediation resources with the recommended fix and link and all the rest. So whatever they're using, developers are using in order to address the issues, feed them with embedded remediation instructions. That'll make sure it get fixed fast, but also make sure it isn't repeated. Now, step 5 here, we want to get to that final pre-release testing and production monitoring. We built the app, we got all the innovation, we're getting ready to move through staging and deploy. Now, as you think about your final release, you want to make sure that you consider security in all your final integration, functionality, UX, and other tests. And as part of that, our automated security testing we've been doing throughout the process should give us a very high probability that there aren't security issues that we care about that are going to make it into production. Now, the challenge is that automated security testing can do many things, but can't do everything. There are complex things like Bluetooth IoT or special Wi-Fi features, maybe a multi-factor authentication, things of that nature. And so there's 2 ways you can bring in a little bit of manual. So guided testing is an innovation in the market led by NowSecure. Guided testing enables an expert to periodically test certain components of an application as it's doing automated testing in the pipeline. So if I was using guided testing, I could be doing guided testing once a week, for example, once a month, once a quarter. That's where a human will interact and do those hard to test components, but feed that same data into the pipeline. You can also leverage expert pen testers for those super high risk applications. If you're like a banking app or a healthcare app that interacts with the body, you want to use pen testers, expert pen testers on your team or from a third party to do that heavy duty testing necessary in your regulated world. Now, your policy that we established earlier on should determine what gets tested where at what level. Maybe you're using a tiered risk model as part of that. That'll tune your depth and frequency. And by the way, when you're generating these, make sure these tickets or issues that are found in guided and pen testing are also generated into the issue ticketing system with all that embedded remediation we talked about earlier as well. So we get through all this. Tier 1 app, we get extra guided or expert pen testing. Tier 2, Tier 3 risk makes it through with the automation. Now it's time to push it into prod. Make sure you monitor and prod. A lot of organizations miss this point. You should have security monitoring for your production apps where applicable, in other words, if they're medium or high risk applications, because you want to be able to capture any new issues from dependencies while in production. Maybe your application's using a third-party service that changes and becomes vulnerable, or third-party library or asset on the device that becomes vulnerable over time. So you want to monitor it in production, which is something that you can do. You want to feed any of those issue tickets back into your pipeline the same way. You should also be tracking those security issues as escape defects. So your development team probably has an escape defects program for other kinds of bugs, and leverage these in your security training and ticketing systems as well. All right, so let's bring it all together. Let's wrap up for our great session today. So reminder, I'm in the Q&A and the chat. Feel free to make comments or ask questions as we go. Let's summarize what we've seen. So we saw 3 great organizations who really blew it out with literally hundreds of millions of users, almost 1 billion users actually at scale. And learning from them and learning from our other hundreds of customers, we've realized that there really are these 5 key best practices to get you to scale. Practice incrementalism in your organization. Incrementalism means you start and improve incrementally. You can't be expected to do all of this overnight. But these things will really get you there to scale. So first, start with standards, right? The OWASP MASVS and the OWASP Mobile Project is a standard for dev, QA, security, and architecture teams to determine what security means for mobile and how to build mobile apps. Then move into leverage, and with that, leverage the right standards-based security testing tools like SAST, TAST, IAST, and APISec. That's number 1, start with standards. Number 2 is establish policies and SLAs. This is where you're going to bring together all the key stakeholders: dev, architect, security, QA, and DevOps. Within that, you're going to establish policies so that up front, you understand what standards you're applying to, like OWASP, what industry requirements you have, perhaps like GDPR, and move to a model where you're going to be able to determine policy, document policy, and have policy as code running in your pipeline. Now, with the SLAs, then, this is how each team is going to operate. No, security testing isn't going to test for everything. Yes, development is going to fix what security finds. Development and security are going to agree on what security requirements are up front, and DevOps is going to track metrics. All of these different things come together in establishing policies. Then we moved into knowledge, right? Enabling continuous security training and education. Now, in the discussion that we had there, we saw that proactive training is training on the things each of those teams should know. And we looked at how OWASP can help. In fact, we looked at the top 5 security issues that we find in testing millions of apps and basically give you a recipe on how to learn how to write code better so those top 5 security issues don't happen to you. For enabling continuous security training, you want to have the upfront proactive training, and then you want to have the embedded remediation that's going to occur in your security tickets with micro training. Now, the real cornerstone of any pipeline is number 4, automated development, automated builds, automated testing. So we want automated security testing and remediation. That means integrating a testing system into your Bitrise environment. A test system like NowSecure that does automated SAST, TAST, IAST, and APISec. Run your build, automatically run the test, automatically generate issue tickets, automatically feed those issue tickets back to the developers in your bug ticketing system, and make sure all of those tickets have embedded remediation. Embedded remediation includes things like the evidence you need, the description and the business impact, the steps to remediate, sample codes, link to Apple and Google documentation, and all those things. Now, bringing it all together, there are some apps that are very high-risk apps, especially with critical PII in them. So make sure that you add guided testing or pen testing. While automated testing gives you 80 or 90% coverage, there are those things that are going to need a human. So leverage either NowSecure's innovative guided testing or enterprise pen testing into that to close those last few gaps, but only for the highest risk. So bring all these 5 together, you will achieve that scale we've talked about. Practice incrementalism to try to get there. Now, if you're in this session today and you're attending the Visible event overall, you're obviously interested in training. So I talked earlier about proactive training. NowSecure Academy is a free online training environment. No charges, no fees. Leverage the barcode here, surf to academy.nowsecure.com, get your free training starting today. NowSecure throws an annual mobile conference. NowSecure Connect 2022 just ended. You can watch the replays here. Jump into the barcode. There's another 20 hours of training for you there. We were excited to have Bitrise there and included Bitrise in our sessions. And then a while ago, I did a how to build secure mobile apps effectively, partnering with your team at Bitrise. There's a really great replay here. It's got a deeper dive of what we went into today. It also has a hands-on demo that you can see that is actually running pipeline with Bitrise, NowSecure, and the ticketing systems. Now, if you're here, you're building your own mobile apps, let's get you some free stuff. So have a free SBOM, get you that software bill of materials to see what we can find in your binary. We can also give you a free security report. If you scan and go get your free security report, we'll actually proactively run your application for you. Then we'll book a consultation call and walk you through the results to make sure you understand them. And if for anything that you find, make sure you know how to fix them because you probably want to fix them. There's no strings attached to either of these. But we'll consult with you as you like in order to improve your security program, help you understand what we found. Now, NowSecure is a full application solution suite. We look forward to working with any of you. If you're a mobile company and you're building with Bitrise, you should be using NowSecure for your AppSec as well. And so I'd like to thank you for joining me today. I'm Brian Reed, the Chief Mobility Officer here at Now Secure. It's been great to be part of the Bitrise Mobile DevOps Summit here. You can find me here. I'm still in the chat and the Q&A if you want to ask me any final questions as we wrap up. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.